Well, I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority. I'm someone who has been a murderer for almost 20 years.
Maybe I should have killed 400 or 500 people, then I would have felt better.
People say Ted Bundy didn't show any emotion. There must be something in there. I showed emotion. You know what people said? See, you really can get violent and angry.
Welcome to the Squonk The Hag, a podcast about murder, mystery, the supernatural, and even a conspiracy or two.
Dun, dun, dun.
My name is Mo.
And I'm Kraken.
Welcome back, guys, to another fun episode of the Squonk The Hag.
Random squonk noises. What sound does a squonk make?
I think, well, since it dissolves into a puddle of tears, it's probably something like drippy water or something.
I thought you were going to say it's probably just crying, so you should just start off the episode just by crying in the corner.
Okay, I'm down with this one.
Okay.
Go cry, crack. No, I'm kidding. But this week is another crime episode, and this is actually one that was brought to our attention by a listener. So I don't know if you know Mumsy in the Discord, Kracko?
I do.
Yeah, so this was a while back. I had put a thing on Twitter about like your local true crime stories, and
Yeah, I remember that.
yeah, so we got a bunch of really great ones. I know Whimsy sent in one that I have been researching on and off for a while, and then Mumsy and
Can I before we continue, can I point out, did you just say Whimsy again? Did you mean Whiskey?
Crap, her name is Wisty.
Right, that's how.
Why do I always call her Whimsy?
I don't know, but that's fine, because that's what they changed their name to in the podcast Discord, I think, because of the inside joke.
It is because I always screw up. I always screw up the name, and I adore her. I adore her, and she sends me pictures of her kitten all the time, and she's amazing. And yet, I still, without fail, screw up her name every single time I say it.
I think it's because the Twitch name was like Whimsical Wisty, so you're combining both of them. Your brain is just like, let's just shorten this to Whimsy.
Yes,
Which is fine.
this is fine. It's fine. Anyway, so back to tonight's story. This is one that Mumsy had listed that her grandfather used to tell them growing up. And then Allie dug in and found out a bunch of craziness that happened, because this is actually from the late 1920s, early 1930s. So it's a little bit in the Wayback Machine.
A little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely different. And we have talked about this time period before. This is during the Great Depression. In 1929 is when things kind of hit the fan, metaphorically speaking. The stock market crashed, which started the Great Depression, and it saw a rise in unemployment and poverty across the country. So those who were already either lower or middle class got hit the hardest, and the Midwest was hit really, really hard. I actually pulled up that, so let's just kind of zoning in like the Iron Ranges of Minnesota, the coal districts of Illinois, unemployment was over 70% at the time. And then in Chicago, which, you know, this is the urban city. This is a lot different than, you know, coal mines and things like that. It was estimated at 40% unemployment, which is crazy. Absolutely crazy.
That's getting up there just a little bit. It's higher than we would like those numbers to be in.
Yeah, well, to add to it, farm prices were at an all-time low, and farming income dropped 60%. So you already had debt and tax issues and all that stuff, and now you're getting less money in as well. I have seen at places that it got so bad because they couldn't afford to pay workers that crops were just rotting in the fields while people were starving because they couldn't afford to farm the crops to feed the people.
I mean, if the stock market's already down, what would the farmer not just be like, hey, just, take it? He didn't sell it anyway, so I mean...
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe people were going and just like stealing crops and things like that, but you also have to think...
I would imagine there was some of that.
Yeah, but also, people were starving in cities that would get the crops imported, so they weren't necessarily next door. Another thing from all of this, so one of the big aggravating issues to the Great Depression was that people had their money in banks, and when it crashed, the money just went away because it was all gone. There was no money there. So it actually started the FDIC, which is it stands for the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Had to look that one up, but that is...
Yeah, that was gonna be me. I was like, I needed some explanation on that one.
It basically insures the money in the bank to a certain amount. So the way banks work is they don't have all of the money that people are saving or whatever on hand at all times. They have to have a certain percentage. They have to follow, this outlines the rules of everything. But even if a bank closes, like a bank just completely goes out of business, which at the time of the Great Depression, many, many banks just went out of business. They just shut their doors and they were done.
In terms of money, we have no money.
Yeah. Well, with the FDIC, even if a bank closes its doors, you will still be able to get your money because it is insured. Whereas back then, bank closed its doors, sorry. And I saw in one article, they estimated it was over $1.3 billion was lost.
I feel like that's something you shouldn't do, is losing that amount of money. Losing $1 or something here and there, but it's a bit of a steep number. Definitely more than 4.
Definitely more than 4. And you have to think, these were people's lives. Like, that was everything they had in the bank, and it was just gone one day. Also, you have to think $1.3 billion in the 20s. That is definitely more than 4.
Yes.
I can't even do the math. My brain, I think, is going to start smoking and people will smell it, because it's going to catch fire here.
I mean, I already do, but I wasn't going to say anything.
When you smell smoke, you might want to see a doctor.
Burnt toast.
Yeah. Should I let you go? Do you need to go to the urgent care or something?
It's fine. I'm sure it's fine.
So in the Midwest during the Great Depression, there were the economic struggles. There was also the environmental disaster known as the Dust Bowl, which sent many, many farmers into crisis. So not only did they not have money, but now there was an environmental disaster, and there were you had to make a choice, and none of them were good. So for some, they packed up and left. They went to California looking for work. They, did whatever they could, moved to the city, etc. But other people...
Yeah, I remember a little bit about that, about the people leaving during the Dust Bowl thing, about going to California.
Other people made some much darker decisions. Suicide rates skyrocketed. I know we talked about the Cecil Hotel with the insane amount of suicides.
Yes, the suspicious amount.
The suspicious amount of suicides. We also... It's not bad enough to have a Great Depression, but this is the same time period that the Cleveland torso murderer was running around. So it was a super, super duper fun time. And by fun, I mean awful. So our story is going to take place near Patton, Missouri. It is a town, city located in, I think it's said Bollinger County. And it's along the Missouri and Illinois border, about 100 miles south of St. Louis. And it is an area full of just rural farming communities. So in January of 1932, we're going to focus in on one of those farms, which is the Davenport family.
All the fun stuff, all the fun stuff always happens on farmland.
Sure. Fun. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nothing will go wrong, I'm sure.
Yeah, especially if we're covering it on this podcast.
Yeah, it's gonna be fine.
So Oliver Davenport was a family man. He had a good reputation. He lived on a small farm off of Highway 51 with his wife Clara and their 7 children. Some of these names are doozies.
Oh boy.
There was 12-year-old Worcester, the 10-year-old twins Virgie and Verda, 7-year-old Clara Faye, 5-year-old Raymond, 3-year-old Louise, and 10-month-old Vanita.
Not making fun of anyone's name here, but like, wow, that's definitely different. This time frame here is just, those are just lawless wastelands when it comes to names.
Well, the names change over the years too.
Yeah.
I guess there was a recurrence of some like old-fashioned names coming back, like Ethel and Rose and that kind of stuff. But yes.
Yeah, but where did Wooster come from?
I don't know, but I think so. Chris and I follow the Reading Royals, which is a minor league hockey team that's not far from us. It's in Reading, Pennsylvania, which we've talked about before. The city, not necessarily the Royals, but they play a rival team that it's spelled much differently than the way Worcester's name is here, but it's the Worcester Railers. As soon as I saw that, I was like, wait, like the hockey team? But it's spelled much different. So this is Wooster, and that is, it actually looks like Worcester, but it said Worcester.
So he was named after a bottle of Worcestershire sauce, or however you say that, because I know I'm going to pronounce that wrong, but I do my best.
With your abacus chair?
Yes.
So the Davenport name was kind of known in the area because Oliver had several brothers and they lived all over the county. So he had brothers, they had families. It was a pretty prominent family in the area. Oliver and Clara had lived on this particular farm for about 2 years, and they were planning to move to another area January 7th of this year. So 10 months before this, Oliver had sold the farm to a neighbor named Fred Stone, and then later arranged for the family to move. He hired men and wagons, and they were going to load everything up and move. But as well as everything seemed to be going, everything was great. We're going to start over at a new farm. On January 7th, 1932, things went horribly and unexpectedly wrong.
So this is the part where true crime documentaries and series just go, things were fine until they weren't.
Yes. Now, back in the day, we know records weren't the best. So we don't know the exact layout of the house. We don't have blueprints or anything like that, which, in some cases, once it gets, more modernized, we do have those things, but we can kind of piece together some information based off of news articles and stuff like that. But the farmhouse itself would have been small. And there were articles saying that the entire family, so that would have been 9 people, 2 adults, 7 children, they all slept in a single main room together. Different beds, but one room. And there were at least 2 beds mentioned, but there probably would have been more. And with a baby, there probably would have been a crib or a bassinet or something like that. Adjacent to this room was a small kitchen, and it was either like an add-on or like an addition to the home, or at least partitioned off from the main room where they slept. So it wasn't necessarily a wall, but there might have been a curtain or something across there.
It was like a makeshift wall.
Yeah. But beyond that, there aren't a lot of details out there as to what the rest of the house was. I don't know if it was a single floor. I'm assuming it was, but it would have been like a small little, yeah.
Describing the open floor plan with like separate beds, but just all in the same room. Most likely a single floor. It's probably just one room entirely, and you have to split it up yourself, like they did with, like you said, with curtains or whatever.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like a small cabin, that type of situation.
Probably something like that.
So sometime between 3 and 4 in the morning, Oliver got out of bed, got dressed. He grabbed a 1.5-pound claw hammer and woke up his wife, Clara. She was still asleep in one of the beds, and 2 of the children were in bed with her. Oliver told his wife that all he saw was starvation in the future of their family, blamed her for the extravagance and financial ruin that they were facing, and then started attacking her. He hit her in and around her head at least 9 times. Her screams woke up 2 of the oldest children, which are Worcester and Verda. Both of the kids began to run from the house. I can imagine that the mother would have told them to run. A lot of times you see if a mother is in danger, she will tell her children to remove themselves from the danger. She will, run, go, get out of here.
This just went from 0 to 100 very quickly. I was not expecting that sharp left turn.
Yeah, it came out of nowhere, and it came out of nowhere for them. Worcester and Verda are running from the house. Oliver struck Verda while she was running. But when the 2 children got outside of the house, Worcester said they needed to stay safe and run and go get some help. However, Verda insisted on going back in the house and helping her mother and their siblings. So you have to remember, there's 5 more children in that house.
Yeah, but going back is probably not going to be the best idea either, because what are you going to do?
Well, the decision led to Verda losing her life. She was killed by her father when she returned to the house. Meanwhile, Worcester was barefoot in his pajamas, and this is January. There was snow on the ground, but he ran for an hour to get help and raise the alarms. So it didn't take an hour to get to the neighbor's house, but he got to the neighbor's house. They raised the alarms, got everything. So it took an hour for help to get back to the house.
It just shows like how far away they are from like everything.
Yeah, it's a rural farming community. So you have to think it's farm next to farm next to farm, and they all have lots of land. So it is not close. It is not close.
Yeah, there's nothing.
During the time that Worcester ran to get help, Oliver continued to attack the rest of the children in the house with the hammer. Then, when he was done, he sat on the floor of the main room, put a single barrel shotgun to the side of his head, and ended his own life. Later, Clara reported that she heard Oliver call her as he sat with the gun, but she remained quiet and he assumed she was dead. And that's when he did everything himself. When help arrived, they were really nervous to go inside because what if he was still in there wielding a hammer? Nobody knew. And they weren't sure if he was going to attack them. Oliver's half-brother heard groaning from inside the house, so he called out. He was, trying to figure out what's happening going in there, and Clara replied. So she was still alive. She was badly injured.
Clara was, refresh my memory,
the wife, the mother.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I was like, make sure.
So she was in very bad condition. She had massive head trauma, which happens when you get hit in the head with a hammer.
Usually, yes.
But she was still alive. And when they got there, she said that Oliver had attacked them and then shot himself. So they were like, okay, he unfortunately is no longer alive, but that means that he can't attack them. So they entered the house and found an absolutely horrifying scene.
I'm sure. No one wants to go. No one wants to be the one to go in the house during that. Just nah.
No, they do not. This is one of those things. So this is very similar. I don't know why. It's like when you watch like CSI or whatever, and they have that one episode where it's just flashbacks of all the stories they've done in the season.
Yeah.
But it makes me think of the Stanley Detweiler case, where it was something that the police chief walked in on and was so shocked and appalled they didn't know what to do. So this is another case like that, where it is not something, it's not a crime that not even wouldn't enter your mind. It's not something that you would ever think would possibly ever even be a fraction of something that could occur.
Yeah, because like I said, when the story really took that turn, I was just like, we were on a happy farm a few minutes ago. What happened?
They never really were completely sure what happened. There are ideas and things like that, but there was never any kind of concrete, oh, this is why he did it.
Yeah.
Which I think makes it worse.
Yeah, to me that's always worse. Is just, yeah, it's bad any time, whether they have a reason or not, but at least you have some sort of explanation, not just murder for the sake of murder.
Yeah, like I know my therapist tells me this all the time. I'm a problem solver. So I need to have that conclusion, which is why I struggle watching unsolved mysteries, because I want to know what happened. I want to figure it out. I want to find the answer. Like I am an answer person. So when you go and you don't have an answer and you will never get that answer, I'm just like, but I want to know.
Like I need the answers. I don't need sleep. I need answers.
And then I'm, sticking stuff on the wall with yarn. Drawing lines.
Yes.
I actually thought about it. So I have a wall in my office here that is chalkboard paint, and they make magnetic chalkboard paint. And I was like, should I put another layer on here so that I can stick stuff to it and I can hang papers up and do that without ruining my walls?
Understandable. Meanwhile, me putting the soundproofing foam on my wall, I just got like industrial strength silicone adhesive glue to stick it to the wall. So if this foam comes off the wall, it's taking part of the drywall with it.
So hopefully you never move.
Yeah. Because if the foam comes off, I have a feeling you just gotta replace the drywall, because it's probably gonna take the wall with it.
Oh Lord.
Just full send, just slap all the glue on the back. It'll be fine. That's future me's problem.
That is future you's problem. If you lived closer, I would tell you I know a guy, because I think I told you this. We had some plumbing issues. The drywall guy came out and he's like, your ceiling's still wet. So he cut out some of it so it was air out a little bit more. We had a fan pointed at it for 2 weeks, dried out the drywall, but then he replaced the ceiling and now it looks like new.
Hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah, that bathroom better not leak again.
Let's hope not.
But he did a really great job.
Well, that's good.
So there's that.
Yes. He just came in and now there's just a patch of blue drywall just in your ceiling, this random color.
No, it looks really good. It is even, we haven't even painted over it yet and you can barely see it. So he did a good job, and we no longer have a hole in our ceiling.
Yes.
We just have to paint it.
Ah, yes, that.
Hey guys, it's Mo here, and I wanted to take just a second to talk to you about Anchor.fm. When Kraken and I decided to start the podcast, we had no idea what we were doing. And we went out there and searched to see what we could find to help us, because you have to not only create the audio and the podcast itself, but you also have to upload it to all the different services. And how do you do that? So we found Anchor, and it has been a godsend. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit right from your phone or your computer, so you don't even have to have fancy editing software to do it. You can also, when using Anchor, you can distribute it to all the listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and more. I know Stitcher's on there, Radio Public. It's amazing. And it's all in one place. If you guys followed me when I was streaming, you know that I am all about streamlining everything to a single application to do it all. And that is what Anchor does for us. Plus, big point here, Anchor's totally free. So you can either download the Anchor app from the App Store on your phone, or you can go to anchor.fm to get started. I highly suggest it, and I hope you will enjoy it if you, too, are starting your own podcast.
Oliver's body was laying where he shot himself. And some reported that the hammer was still clutched in one of his hands. But I don't know how accurate that is because, that's some people say it could have been, like urban legend type stuff, because he did also have to deal with a shotgun and all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, if he's sitting on the floor, there's propping it up and things like that, and you just have to use the one hand. But, I wouldn't say clutching, but, it could just be, laying in his hand, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. When help arrived, the only family members still alive were his wife, Clara, and then his daughters, Virgie and Clara Faye, as well as his son, Worcester, who ran to get help. However, 7-year-old Clara Faye didn't make it to the hospital. She passed away before she even got there.
No.
Clara and 10-year-old Virgie were rushed to the nearest hospital, and both were suffering from fractured skulls from the attack. Newspapers reported that they were in critical condition, but both mother and daughter would recover. Additionally, I had seen that obviously the medical bills were astounding for the two of them to be in the hospital suffering from head trauma. It was expensive, Great Depression, etc. And it looks like the community actually put together a fund to help with their medical bills, which was really neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was like the GoFundMe of the 1930s.
GoFundMe of the 1930s. Bro, I wasn't ready.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to think of 1930s slang. What would it be called?
I don't know, but it wasn't supposed to be a joke. I was just trying to think of something to compare it to.
GoFundeth me.
GoFundeth me?
Wait, that's medieval. That's not 1930s.
How is it that when we talked about the North Hollywood shootout from the 90s, you were like in 1933, but now we're in 1932. We're almost in 1933, and now you're like medieval times.
Yes, it is time for the medieval lingo.
Oh Lord. Okay, so the GoFundeth me.
Yes.
So yes, the community helped raise money because they were in the hospital very long term, but they did recover. So the 3 survivors were Clara, Virgie, and Worcester. Unfortunately, Verda, Raymond, Louise, and the baby Vanita were declared dead at the scene. The news of the murder-suicide spread very quickly. The newspapers printed the story hours after it happened. And you think back then, that is a big deal. Nowadays, you can get a message to someone in seconds, whereas this was before then. There was a little bit of technology like phones and stuff, but there wasn't a quick, easy way to get information out there like this. So this was like wildfire. And through the Associated Press, the story actually got national coverage. In the first reports, because again, it was hard to disperse information at the time. So there was some false information that the Davenports were facing financial ruin and they were losing the land that they lived on. But that was later amended when people found out that he actually sold the farm. He took it upon himself to sell the farm to someone else. So he got money from the farm, therefore not financial ruin. But at first they thought they had lost the farm and someone else had purchased it, which would have explained maybe some of the mindset. But since that wasn't the case, again, huge question marks as to why did he do this?
Exactly.
Yeah, many pointed out that Oliver showed no signs of distress leading up to this. A lot of times when people have some sort of mental break, there are signs leading up to it. You know, they were stressed, they were acting funny. There was nothing, and nobody could fathom why he would commit a crime like this. In the newspapers, they claimed that he had to have suffered some sort of mental imbalance or mental break to cause him to do this with no warning and in this manner, because it wasn't just I killed my family and then myself. It was a brutally vicious attack. And that raises a lot of red flags, even probably to a psychologist today. They would be like, whoa.
Yeah.
Now, it was reported that between 3,000 and 3,500 people attended the funeral for Oliver and the 5 children. The pastor actually spoke about Oliver's positive reputation, his good standing in the community, and how much he loved his children, which I actually would have suspected that it would have been the opposite, that they would have not really talked about him and really focused on the children.
You would think, but
all 5 of the children were buried together in a single plot, so they would be together. And then Oliver was buried nearby, which that kind of ties into what I would think, where they would have separated him from the family that he murdered. Worcester went to stay with his aunt until his mom and his sister got out of the hospital. So like I said, they were in the hospital for a long period of times. So it took a little bit for them to be able to come home and take care of him. So he stayed with his aunt. And then once they were out of the hospital, the 3 of them were reunited. But after that, we don't really know what happened to the surviving members.
hopefully they're all doing good now. And
I doubt the mom is still alive, because this was the 30s and it is 2022. Yeah. The kids might still be around.
this is fair.
But the mom probably wouldn't.
Yeah, you know me and math, and then I for a brief second forgot we're talking about 1930s. So
Hopefully they had a long, happy life.
yes, that's what I was getting at. But we all know me and words don't, we don't play nice together. So
Well, you can only count to 4.
this is true.
The land and the house stayed there for some time. After everything that happened, Fred Stone was like, I'm not going to move into this place. Absolutely not. There ended up being stories of hauntings and misfortunes. So after the murders, relatives took the personal items, the household items and everything, took them, either sold them, or obviously Worcester, Clara, and Bergie, some of those things they kept, the clothing, that kind of stuff. But they removed everything from the house. They locked it all up, boarded it all up. But people kept breaking in because they wanted to see the crime scene. They wanted to see where this happened.
Of course.
Yeah. So the family reported that hundreds of people went through the house before they were forced out and the house was nailed up. Some locals say that strange deaths occurred in the house, but eventually the house did burn down. Others claim that the property always seems to have a strange fog that kind of floats around. So it does have a little bit of a haunty, ghosty sort of feel to it, but I'm not sure how much is legend, how much is hearsay, how much is actually true, what kind of strange deaths occurred, those types of things. But as I said, the house did eventually burn down, and there are still remnants of the building, just like stuff down at the ground level that was left over, but it's pretty much open abandoned land now.
Just empty land, yeah. Well, hearing the slight descriptions of the house and everything, or the cabin or whatever, and then catching fire, I would imagine there's just not much left there to do anything with, so that's understandable.
No, there's not. It's kind of just like a pile of logs. And, back then, most of the house would have been wood. So it's not like today where you have something synthetic materials and that kind of stuff with like a wooden framework and then, siding or glass or all that stuff. Like this would have been mostly wood.
Yeah.
It would have been probably a very large, uncontrolled fire.
And being way out there in the farming community, I would assume the response time was not very good for like fire departments and stuff.
It's a rural farming community. So at the time in the 30s, well, I'm not sure when it burned down. Depending on when it burned down, who knows if they had a fire truck.
This is also true.
I mean, even now, like, depending on where you are, you have to get a fire truck from the next county over.
Uh-huh.
But kind of circling to the crime itself. And Oliver Davenport is what is considered a family annihilator. It's a type of killer who removes the lives of the entire family, if possible. In an interview with Newsweek, a sociologist and criminologist named Jack Levin defined a family annihilator as a husband or father, certainly one of the family members, who kills the entire family unit, not just his wife or one of his children, but every member of the family. So luckily he was not completely successful because there were some survivors, but his intention was to end the whole family's lives that early morning. And then, like most family annihilators, the killer also takes their own life.
It ain't have to be like this, but why though?
Well, the primary motive among male family annihilators is economic struggles. The annihilator sees the death as merciful compared to the future that they might face. The killer also sees themselves as a victim, blaming someone or something else for their misfortune. So Clara said that Oliver, when this all happened, told her they were going to starve, and he also blamed her. So this type of person, this type of personality, this type of killer does not see themselves as a murderer. They see themselves as a merciful, I don't want to say angel of death because that's another type of killer, but they are someone who thinks they are doing something for the betterment of the people they are killing.
Yeah.
Which is twisted.
What like him blaming them for their financial stuff or whatever in the beginning. Yeah, that kind of lines up.
And like I said, this fits the pattern of a family annihilator. And, this was in the swing of the Great Depression. This is when things were looking really bleak, and the outlook for farmers was bad. It was very bad. Like I said, there were farms that were just abandoned, shut down, etc. So it is possible that basically that is the existence, and Oliver took it too far and just immediately assumed that they were all going to starve and die, and that's why he did this. Again, not a good reason.
Yeah, no, there's no good reason at all for this.
No, but it does add a little bit of perspective.
Yeah.
To like, it is possible that that's what he was thinking when he said they were all going to starve. He was skipping over tomorrow and the next day and immediately going to 6 months down the line and thinking that everything was going to go sideways. And instead of trying to avoid that or trying to change things, he just did the unthinkable. And unfortunately, these types of killers, they happen even to this day. There is a huge list of different ones over the years, and it's something that, has been studied, but sucks.
Yes.
Yeah, like there's no, I don't have any words for.
It is, and it's always similar and yet slightly different. Each story is like I know we talked about it before, how there's different types of killers. Like you just mentioned, you just went through the whole thing about them blaming other people or whatever. It really is. The more you do kind of like what we do and research different stories and stuff, you can see that more and more than you realize.
Yeah, and there are patterns. So I watched a TED Talk with a man named Jim Fallon. Not Jimmy, Jim. Very different person. But he is a researcher, scientist, and he actually looked into the sort of makeup of a serial killer. And we've talked about this before about, there's often head trauma, there's often this and that. And there actually is a genetic link as well. So there is a gene that is common across serial killers. So having this gene does not make you a serial killer. I will start with that. But it gives you a predisposition. So this is actually something that a lot of people have. A lot of people have.
Yeah.
So men and women, but this actually also helps explain the much lower number of women serial killers than men, because it is a gene that is only found on your X chromosome. So with women, you have 2 X chromosomes. You have a half as likely to have this be prevalent, whereas men have 1 X chromosome. So if your mother gives you this gene, good luck. No, like I said, it does not make you a serial killer. However, you mix that gene with head trauma, abuse, a lot of the horrible things that happen in the lives of serial killers. That is what slowly converts them into this horrible monster.
Yeah, because with a lot of serial killers and stuff like that, it is a lot of like trauma and stuff that triggers it, so to speak. So
yeah. So it's highly possible that like you and Chris have this gene, but because you have had healthy lives,
yes,
you're not out there murdering people. So it's a very interesting thing because
good. Let's keep it that way.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where it's not just a black and white like gene yes bad, gene no good. It's one of those things, but it's one of the many factors that leads to it. So it's actually
it's one ingredient.
Yes.
In the recipe.
Let's just say a serial killer is the worst, horrible, monstrous cake ever.
It's like making boxed cake, except you just have the boxed cake mix and nothing else.
Yeah. That's a really
if
good.
If you don't add the eggs in the milk, it's not gonna make the cake.
Exactly. There you go. That's exactly it.
And in this instance, we probably shouldn't be like linking serial killers and cake, because cake is good, serial killers are bad. So I mean,
that's why I prefaced that it's the worst cake ever.
Fair enough.
Yeah, this is that weird nasty cake.
This is the display cake that you grab thinking it was an actual cake and you get it home to cut it open and it's just cardboard with icing on it.
Please tell me that you have done this and you are speaking from experience.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I don't know where I got that story from. I honestly don't remember if it was actually someone I know telling the story or if it was you or who it was telling the story.
It wasn't me.
But it was, the lady came in asking for a cake and ended up taking home the cake. Later on, came back to return it and they were like, this is a display cake. It's cardboard. Oh, it was a TikTok. I'm being told this was a TikTok. Turns out they grabbed display cake because their manager told them, oh, no, it's fine. We just have the sign up here that says display. The manager didn't understand that display only means it's not a real cake and sold them the display.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's rough. That's real rough.
Yes.
So, cakes aside, serial killers aside, that was the end of the story of the Davenport family murders.
That was an interesting one that I had not heard before, and definitely went from 0 to 100 real quick.
Yeah, I had never heard of it before either. And once we, like I said, once we got those listener submissions, it was one of those ones that was like, what?
Yeah, I'm starting to get more and more stuff on the spooky side of stories. So, like, I've been saving these for research later.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite things is like hearing, because as much as I love true crime podcasts and true crime documentaries, you kind of hear a lot of the same stories over and over. I know there is a Netflix documentary right now that's very popular, American Murderer, about Chris Watts, which is a story that Bailey Sarian covered on YouTube years ago when it was actually happening. She watched the trial. She read the 5,000-page documents from the court trial and everything like that. And that was actually her first episode of Murder, Mystery, and Makeup. And then this documentary came out and people were like, this story is so crazy. And I'm like, this sounds so familiar. This sounds so familiar. And then I watched it. I was like, oh, it's because I've heard this one. And that sounds kind of snotty and condescending. And that's not what I mean by it. But it's like, I like hearing about new stories and seeing more of the breadth of everything.
Yes.
And making those connections like you were talking about with seeing the patterns and the psychology and that kind of stuff. So I don't know where I'm going with this.
This is one of those rabbit holes we fall down
Us?
after the story's over.
No, we never.
No, we would never go down rabbit holes. No, we don't do that. Not here. No, not at all.
So, speaking of tangents and everything like that, you were running a bit late this evening, and I texted Chris, and I was like, "Yeah, I messaged Kraken, didn't hear from him," and he came upstairs. He's like, "So what are we doing?" And I was like, "We're waiting for Kraken to reply." He's like, "Oh."
Fair enough.
He thought I was telling him that he had to be on the podcast again.
I mean, if he wants to join us for a Krakow Tales, I'm fine with this too. That would be interesting.
I will let him know. But it was,
So let him know if he's interested in hearing the tale of the Mothman at some point.
I will see what he thinks. But it was funny. He came upstairs to get his cup of tea, and he was all like ready to go. I was like, "Do you want to be on the podcast?" He's like, "No, but I thought you needed me to."
It seems like he was ready and eager to be on the podcast. He just didn't want you to know that.
Yeah, accurate.
Just slip the word out there that like, hey, you're invited to join, even though Krakow is here. You're still welcome.
He is a goober.
I mean, so are we, but yes.
Fair. So yeah, that is the tale of Oliver Davenport and the tragedy that took place in Missouri.
I would say that was a good story, but it wasn't, but you get what I mean.
As always, make sure to check out our website for all the show notes, sources, and more information at thesquonkandthehag.com.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, and bonk the notification bell to get alerts for new episodes and content.
All right, Krakow, you ready?
Okay, bye.